Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone, and welcome to episode 26 of Tuesday Talks and Tips. And today's presenter is familiar to many of you who have followed these episodes, none other than past District Director Trish Wells of District 3, Arizona. But more importantly, she is the chief guru, honcho, chair of the Pathways Help Desk in her district. And it's not just her district who is gaining from this. She has shared the plethora of resources in the Area 3 library of Pathways, gizmos, and all that with the world when she's doing her sessions as well as on the Pathways discussion forum. Now, Trish has completed 5 traditional DTMs, but that wasn't enough for her. She is currently working on her DTM for Pathways. She has completed 2 paths, visionary communication, and she's also proficient in presentation mastery, and she is now working on 2 other paths. And tonight is it's a different kind of approach because she has been talking before about the CC and the advanced manuals being somewhere embedded in Pathways, and she has talked about how the evaluations are so useful in Pathways, and there's so many other topics she's talked about, but this one is the first time that we'll be hearing this. At least this was the first time I'll be hearing it, how the CL, competent leader projects, are actually not all gone. They have been enhanced, improved, and embedded into the Pathways leadership projects. 20 Pathways leadership projects. So I am going to use that cliche, which I hate so much, just for fun for Trish. I will use it without further ado. Let us welcome Trish.
Thank you, Michelle. All right, hopefully you can now all see the start page for our presentation tonight. Before I go too much further, just to elaborate a little bit more, I want to tell you a bit of a story about my start in Toastmasters. Before I got into Toastmasters, when I was starting into my adulthood, I wanted to be a teacher. I trained to be a teacher. I graduated and got my degree so that I could be a teacher. And then reality hit and the teaching jobs all disappeared, and I ended up having to find a new career. It took a while for me to finally land somewhere where I could invent myself in a different career, but I've never lost my desire and passion to want to teach. On the other hand, I've struggled in my career up until about 20 years ago now. Oh gosh, that sounds so old. Where I really thought I was a strong leader, and when I got into the professional arena, I found out I wasn't a very strong leader, and I didn't really understand why. I had been a good teacher. I thought my leadership style was pretty much set, but I really, really struggled. And when I joined Toastmasters, I was fortunate enough to find 2 mentors who adopted me as a project. I did not ask them. They took me on as a project. And Marilyn will chuckle a little bit about the story. She's very familiar with it. We had a couple of leaders in our district that took on projects, and I was one of the projects. And this whole topic of leadership development now really has come full circle as I've been preparing the material for this presentation. How much Pathways is doing to help us grow leaders for both professional reasons and for the benefit of our own organization. So I'm very excited to be presenting this material tonight. As Michelle mentioned, I had a previous presentation where we talked about where's the competent communicator in Pathways. And today, I hope that this presentation will show you where the leadership projects that we know and love are very familiar to us and still there, but there are so much more, and many of them have been enhanced to do a much better job than what we've seen before. So without any further ado, that's from Michelle. Let's go ahead and get started with tonight's presentation. All right. First off, let's celebrate the competent leader. Yes, it's going to be retiring soon here in June 30th. It was introduced back in 2006. We lovingly refer to it as the CL, and it was the first formalized leadership training that we had in our traditional program. It offered 45 defined roles, required or elective, for members to utilize when completing their 10 competent leader projects. But if you really look closely, you'll see that only 2 of the competencies actually required leadership practice. The number 8 project for motivation and the number 9 project for mentoring both required that you actually perform a leadership responsibility. There were 2 others in the group of 45 that made an actual leadership role an option, and those were found in number 6, the organization and delegation, and number 10, the team building projects. Once the competent leader was finished, the next step was the advanced leader bronze, which required that you be a club officer for 6 months. And here's the first gotcha. If you were a member and you did not want to be a club officer, how would you ever be able to advance any further in the traditional leadership program? The Advanced Leader Bronze is required for the Advanced Leader Silver. So if you choose not to be an officer, how do you get to continue earning educational achievements on a leadership track in the traditional program? You can't. You must at some point be a club officer to finish that Advanced Leader Bronze so that you can then be eligible for the Advanced Leader Silver. Now, I'm not dishing the competent leader. It was very successful in raising awareness about our leadership side of our program, and it did a good job at the time for laying a foundation on what leadership development could become. But really, with a little gotcha in there and only 4 actual leadership activities, there's room for improvement here. So welcome to Pathways Leadership. Hopefully, when we are done with this, you will be celebrating the leadership program now in its enhanced version as much as I am excited about the leadership program. Pathways will now expand on the 2 styles of leadership within our core competencies. Remember, we still have 2 tracks, communication and leadership, but tonight's focus is only on the leadership aspect. Those 2 styles of leadership that Pathways offers us are strategic and managerial. Strategic leadership has been defined as the ability to influence others to voluntarily make decisions that enhance the prospects for the organization's long-term success. And your 2 path choices are persuasive influence and visionary communication. If you are into managerial or management style of leadership, then this is more around organizing, planning, leading, and controlling resources within an entity or organization. And your choices here would be innovative planning or team collaboration. Now, the diagram that you're seeing on the left is one that I've used frequently in the presentations, and this was a real breakthrough here in District 3 with our club officers. When I realigned the paths from alphabetical order to weighting order on the right-hand side of the sheet, and then put the call-outs for communication and leadership on the left side of the sheet, I saw all the light bulbs starting to go off in the room on how club officers were going, oh, it's really still the same. We have communication and we have leadership, and those naturally lead to specific paths. Those with communications as being the focus, and those with leadership as being the focus. So if someone comes into the organization and says that they really want to focus on leadership development, then move them down to the 4 paths that are focused on leadership. But you do need to know, do they want strategic leadership practice or managerial leadership practice? And that choice will then narrow it down to one of 2 paths. So getting a member to, or helping a member choose their path even before you go to a computer is easy when you use a sheet like the Paths and Core Competency sheet. So let me pause here because I know Michelle's moderating for me. Do we have any questions? Has anyone tilted at this point?
Well, I don't see any questions, but the moderator does have a question.
Of course.
So I was looking at the you split into strategic leadership or management, and that's a
Mhm.
great way of looking at it. Below the strategic leadership, you have persuasive influence and visionary communication. And I couldn't help thinking about the path that actually carries the word strategic in it, which is strategic relationships.
I
Where
know.
would you put strategic relationships as well as what's the other one? Motivational strategies, which
Okay.
seem to be there.
Well, let's take a look at the diagram then. Let's start with strategic relationships. It would seem that strategic relationships should fall under strategic leadership,
Mhm.
but the actual content direction here in strategic relationships is more towards communication styles. So
Mm,
you'll see the weighting there being 1, 2, 3, and 5. One is public speaking, which all paths have first and foremost. Second, though, is interpersonal communications. So the content is more heavily weighted on interpersonal communications than it is on number 3, strategic leadership. One might say they're a close call, but according to the weighting from Toastmasters International, the
mm.
communication relationship piece of it outweighs the leadership piece of it.
Okay. Yeah, that actually I don't think you can see the light bulb, but yeah, that the light bulb actually went on because I'm working on strategic relationships
Mhm.
now, and yes, there's a lot of communicating rather than leading. So you're right. Great
Okay.
great split there.
Shoo. Okay. All right. Again, the diagram that you see on the left, this is a document that is available from Toastmasters International. On their version, they have the paths sorted alphabetically. If you'd like the version that you're seeing here in this presentation, I'll be telling you more about our District 3 Pathways online library, and that document is available there for anyone that wants to download it and use it. All right, so let's move on. So where are the leadership projects then in Pathways? Remember, I said there were 45 roles in the Competent Leader Manual, but in Pathways, we're going to find that there are 3 introductory leadership roles, and there are 24 actual leadership projects available through required and elective activities. So let's dig in and uncover all 27 of them. We'll start with the first reveal, leadership fundamentals. These are found consistently across path levels 1, 2, and 3, and they're in essence a salute to the Competent Leader Project. If you look at your Base Camp Universal profile, you know that you can see on the left side of the screen here that there are the meeting functionary roles where you can enter the last date that you have fulfilled that particular role. If you're familiar with level 1, you know that the speech evaluator role is required as part of level 1 evaluation and feedback project. And For some paths, and for the ones where it's not required, it is a level 3 elective, to choose the role of topics master for the active listening project. The Toastmaster role, we've been told since day one, is a role that World Headquarters expects members to complete before they enter level 4. Now, disclaimer here, there's no path that requires it. There's no system check in Basecamp that if you don't have a date in Toastmaster, you can't, advance to level 4. So there's nothing systematically or program-wise that requires it. However, if you look through all of the help and Q&A from the Pathways deployments, you'll consistently see that the expectation is that a member will serve as a Toastmaster before they move into level 4. So here's the deal. Basecamp managers, you are the approvers. You need to be working with your vice presidents of education if you aren't one already, and make sure that when you go to sign off on level 3, that you also check universal profiles and ensure that the speech evaluator role, the Toastmaster role, and the topics master role have dates entered in them, and make that part of your approval process to let a member have level 3 approval and move them into level 4. It is really dependent on Basecamp managers to make sure that this happens. Okay? Any hands at this?
Nope,
Nope.
that's clear. That's
Okay.
clear.
All right. The second reveal is the mentor program. Even in my district here, I will often ask people about, well, you finished your first 2 levels, and now you will be offered the option to enroll in the Pathways Mentor program. Oh yeah, I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to do that. Nah, I'm not going to do that. I'm just going to work on my path work. If you're really looking for leadership development, you might want to reconsider. When you enroll in the Pathways Mentor Program, up front, I'll tell you, it does not count towards a Distinguished Club program goal. But that can be a benefit, not a problem. The reason I say that is because it's not contributing to a goal, it allows members to take plenty of time to go through the mentor program and really get to explore and learn from the lessons there. And one reason I would strongly suggest and highly recommend that every member enroll in the Pathways Mentor program is just for the very first project, the Prepare to Mentor. Even 5-time DTM in Toastmasters 20 plus years was stunned by what I learned about myself completing the Prepare to Mentor project. The assessments, if they're done sincerely, will really cause you to reflect about your own leadership capabilities and your leadership style. And based on the years of coaching I've received from the mentors and what I learned about myself from the assessment, in the last year, I've really learned a lot about myself as a leader. I am much more focused now on the areas where I need to improve still, and the areas where I have strengths that I should learn to leverage and rely on. So I am encouraging everyone now to enroll in the Pathways Mentor Program, if for no other reason than to get that first project on preparing to mentor. There's another reason that this should sit in the wings and can sit in the wings and come into play, but for now, let's just stay focused on the very first mentor program project. I like the fact that this is one of the things in Pathways that we don't have to put pressure on anyone to complete. And that can also be a tremendous benefit if you're trying to draw members further into the leadership development aspects of our program. Okay. All right. Julie Carizzi from, I probably slaughtered her last name and I apologize for that. She's out of England. I don't know what district number that is. Michelle probably does. But she just recently had a post on Facebook around beginning with the end in mind. And when picking a path, look at what the path is going to ask you to do by the time you get to the end of it. And what she had was very interesting to me. And what I was able to do is kind of crystallize that by putting it in the matrix that you're seeing now. If you remove the noise and take out the electives and just look at the required projects, you'll see now where the leadership focus comes into play. And what Julie's suggestion was that she was categorizing the leadership projects into 3 or 4 categories, which I've done here myself in the matrix. So you'll see down at the bottom, there's simulated and role play type leadership projects that don't really require you have to have a team, but you're going to practice or have the opportunity to experience leadership skills. There's also where you are going to be a member of a team or lead a sub-team within a larger team. So that will require that you do some leadership, but it's also going to level set with peer feedback. Then you get one-on-one leadership. This is mentoring, and these are mentoring and coaching activities where you'll be working one-on-one, either as the leader or as the protege. And these will involve the 360 feedback activity, which is a huge lesson learned and when it comes to growing as a leader. And we'll talk more about that when we get to the projects using them. And then finally, there's forming and leading teams where you actually have to go out and recruit people to be on the team or select people to be on a guidance committee. And then you have to define a deliverable that your team is going to be responsible for and lay out a plan and the tasks that are going to be needed to be done and set a delivery and then manage to making those delivery expectations. So if you think about those 4 growing levels of leadership, they're now color-coded by the leadership projects. So let's take, for example, visionary communication. It's going to require in level 3 that you actually form and lead a team. It's going to then have 2 simulated or role play projects where you're going to learn about how to communicate change to a group and also how to deliver your vision to a group. So 2 simulated, 1 actual leadership. Let's look at persuasive influence though. You're still working on relationships all the way up to here in communication styles, but now you get into leading in difficult situations. This is a role play where you have people in your Toastmasters meeting or wherever you're delivering this presentation that have a script and are going to challenge you during the course of your presentation so that you learn how to handle when people don't just sit there and be quiet and nice and polite. What do they do? And what do you do as a presenter when you get challenged by your group? And then you're going to jump to a high performance leadership project, which when it comes to project activities is still probably the peak project that we have. It requires not only that you recruit a team, but that you also recruit a guidance committee. It requires that you meet with your guidance committee a minimum of 5 times during the course of the project delivery. So you're looking at, in all likelihood, at least a 6-month effort here, and definitely 2 groups or 2 committees that you have to stay in contact with, stay in communication with, and meet with regularly. So you can see the level that is now expected of you. And if you don't have it in your bandwidth to commit to something like that, perhaps you need to start down a different leadership path. I'd like to get some feedback on this. Anybody like to share something here about, does this help see the paths in a little different light for you? Anybody
You
want to
can,
volunteer?
if you don't
So
know to unmute yourself, but I think everybody does. But just in case, just raise your hand if you can't unmute yourself, or just start speaking. That's fine.
can I add something?
Mm-hmm.
Can I say something? I've never the paths and pathways in this structure. So for me, it's enlightening. It's very clear, and I'd love to get this presentation so I can share it with my club members, because it's much clearer now what you're working to. I've heard many complaints about how similar the beginning is, that
Mm-hmm.
the projects do not align or do not they are not like the traditional system where everything was very thoroughly explained and organized. But when you see it like this, I can see the organization, the relation, and the added value of choosing a path with a certain purpose in mind.
Mm-hmm. All right, very good. And the good news is you are going to be able to get a copy of this presentation and this handout when we're all done tonight.
Thank you very much.
You're
I
very
appreciate
welcome.
it.
All right, so before I move on, let's recap. I'm sorry, was there anybody else that had something to share?
Very quickly, I just wanted to affirm, I totally agree with your perspective about the Pathways Mentor program. The fact that there is no pressure because it is not a DCP point, I actually love it. And I will strongly oppose if they make it a DCP point, because it just makes the focus really on learning and developing that
Mhm.
mentorship skills and helping your protege, rather than hurry up, we need to have a point on our DCP.
Right.
So yeah, I agree.
Yeah, very, very
Thanks,
true.
Trish.
You're welcome. Thank you. All right, so let's just recap. We've talked about making sure that every member serves as an evaluator, a Toastmaster, and ideally a topics master. If the active listening project is not a required project for the path that they have selected, then again, as vice presidents of education or mentors for those new members, I strongly encourage you to strongly encourage them to select the active listening project as one of their level 3 electives. Remember, they get 2. So you're only asking or trying to persuade them to do active listening for one of them. The member has served in a variety of club meeting roles in order to complete all the entries in their profile. Again, one of the complaints I hear most often is that, well, without the competent leader, we can't get people to do the meeting roles. Well, yes, you can, because the expectation as you orient them should be that you want them to have a date in every single one of those roles on their universal profile. It also gives the club and the leadership in the club a chance to see how this member is performing in a variety of roles and get an inside track as to whether they're going to need stronger leadership development in addition to communication skills if they keep saying, nope, I'm just here to work on my public speaking program. A member has also completed their level 2 Introduction to Toastmasters Mentoring Project, where you've heard a story about a protege mentor relationship that they've experienced in life that gives you more insight as to how you might want to help mentor or coach them in their development goals. And then ideally, members will have enrolled in the mentor program and completed at least the Prepare to Mentor project. That assessment, I think, can really lend itself well to good communications or good conversations with the mentors or with the leaders of the club. All right. So let's take another look. Even if we just had this one tool, okay, we'd say, okay, this helps a lot. And I'd still have to go to a project description though, if in order to really see what that project requires. So again, you can open a project description. What I've opened here is lead in any situation. It tells you that the objective here is is in recognizing the need to adapt your style that you learned about in level 2 based on the situation and the people that you're leading. Where are you supposed to complete this activity? In a leadership role in Toastmasters, but it could also be a leadership role in a volunteer organization or in the workplace. The key here is that peers will be involved to provide peer-to-peer feedback. The minimum, though, still is 6 months in the leader role. So that is a long commitment to have to be completed. And this one does involve the 360 feedback, especially the peer-to-peer feedback. So if I were to take on a subcommittee role, say refreshments as part of the conference hospitality room committee, then my service as the refreshment subcommittee chair would allow me to get peer-to-peer feedback from the other subcommittee chairs of that committee. I could be using that as a 6-month leadership role, depending on how your districts plan conferences. But then I would solicit response from the peers that were also subcommittee chairs on how I gelled with the group, how I adjusted, how we worked well, what they observed about me as a leader. Those are valuable lessons for me to learn. And then I give an 8 to 10 minute speech to my club about my experience and or the impact that I learned from my 360 feedback. So this is just one of the 24 leadership projects. And the more you dig into pathways, the more you'll become familiar with the expectations for each of the leadership projects. But I gotta be honest with you, even at my level, 24 leadership projects is a lot in pathways, and it would be a whole lot easier if I just had a cheat sheet. Don't you agree? So naturally, I had to put the cheat sheet
I
together
knew
then.
she would have it. I was going to say, and of course, Trish created one.
So part 2 of this handout then is, where are those leadership projects and what do they really require? So let me just start with some questions though. If you were going through the leadership development or working with someone going through the leadership development, there would be some questions. Did they choose a leadership path? Perhaps they chose a communication path, but now they're rethinking that and maybe they want more development or leadership development opportunities while they also work on communication. Are their leader fundamentals strong? My leadership fundamentals were not strong, and my mentors recognized that. So they started guiding me, and we'll talk more about how do you guide people then. Do I need to have more practice leading with peers? In my particular case, that was my problem. People didn't like me. I came up with solutions too fast. I was ready to go too fast. I just wanted to jump in and get it done too fast. So people thought I was high risk, impulsive, and they didn't think I was a leader worth following. It took years for me to figure that out, but my mentors were able to keep me on a leadership development path while I learned to understand that. And then building a team. Do I need practice building a team? Some people have good fundamentals, but they aren't good at recruiting team members. So again, this is another aspect of leadership that you need to practice. So as you're going through those 3 required leadership roles in a club meeting and going through the mentor assessment, then you're starting to be able to help a member understand how and where they most need to improve. Now you can use the tool on the left-hand side to help you guide them. The Pathways Leadership Project Matrix breaks everything down into those 4 categories that I was introducing to you on the previous page. And it will tell you if there's a team required, is there a size minimum? Is it Toastmasters specific? If it's not, that means this is a project that could be done in a different volunteer organization or in the workplace or in their community. Does the 360 feedback activity come into play? Some people are scared to death of 360 feedback, and this could be a very intimidating activity for them to complete. But as they grow as a leader, they will learn to value the feedback that they get from a 360 exercise. And so maybe save those projects for a little later in their development. Is this project on already a required project on a path? And if so, which path is it a requirement on and at what level? You'll need to get familiar with the little acronyms. So VC, Visionary Communication, DL, Dynamic Leadership, and then the levels would be 3, 4, or 5. If it's not a requirement, is it an elective in the remaining paths? And then you'll see that in the last column. For example, row 5, the managing a difficult audience, is a role play that's done in the club. It does not require that you actually have a project team. It does not use the 360 feedback. It is a requirement in presentation mastery at the level 4 level. And if you're not on presentation mastery, can you still get this project? Yes, it's a level 4 elective in the other 10 projects. So even if someone chose engaging humor and now they were thinking, maybe I should work a few leadership projects as well, you'd be able to introduce a leadership skill like this at level 4 in engaging humor by choosing it as an elective. Okay? All right, so that takes you from left to right. When you go from top to bottom, it's simply by category. So all the simulated or role play type projects that work on leadership's fundamentals are up at the top in the No Team is Required section. There is one project where it requires the peer feedback, so that is your be a team member level. We may see more in the future, but there's the one for now. There are one-on-one leadership projects for mentoring or coaching. 2 of them come from the mentoring program, which again, we still have more to talk about. And then there's one that is a coaching project. It's the improvement through positive coaching. And then the remainder of the 24 projects all fall into the forming or leading a team, and a team is required to perform them. You'll see that the sizes of the team range from 2 up to more, and even unspecified. So those could become very large team efforts. But the object here, or the intent here, is to use this matrix to graduate people through leadership development, setting them up for successful experiences in projects that they can have a relatively high degree for expecting to be successful at, and then gradually getting them out of their comfort zone with larger and larger efforts. And now that we have an open program, and so many of these are available as electives, you can really start customizing leadership development for every member. So again, I'm going to pause here for give everybody a chance to breathe and absorb. Any questions, Michelle?
No, this is just darn good. The only thing is that I had to lean forward. I couldn't quite read the one in black. So you might want to make it, I know there's space limitations, but
Yeah.
you might want to make it bigger, the fonts, because when you say 360, all of that is hard to read. That
It's a
just that one line, the
Yes,
black
and I
one.
will confess that when you actually open the PDF, you're seeing a full-size
Hmm.
Word, or PDF page, and it's a whole lot easier to read. It's
Okay.
obviously been shrunk here as an
Mhm.
image. Yeah. Okay.
I think sorry, Rod. Oof. Anyway, I'll use the last name Reina because I can't suddenly I'm tongue twisted. Were you unmuting to ask a question, or I'm seeing there's movement there? Were you? Oh,
No,
go
no,
Dallas, go Dallas, go Dallas,
Godales, yes.
go Dallas, go Dallas.
No, no, it's
Okay,
clear to me.
okay.
No questions for me. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Okay. All right. So remember, I told you about my initial entry into Toastmasters, where I never had a problem volunteering to take on a task. But I was really strong as an independent contributor, not as a team leader. And I was fortunate that two mentors took me on as a project, and they used this exact approach to help guide me. When I used to work with horses when I was younger, and the idea is, how do you break a horse without breaking their spirit? And it's very true as we develop communicators and leaders in Toastmasters, that we help members identify their strengths and continue to build confidence in those strengths, but we also have to identify where they have room for improvement and guide them in a manner that slowly moves them outside the comfort zone and continues to give them success opportunities, so that they raise that confidence level in what were their weaknesses now can become their strengths. So let's talk about that a little bit more. This is exactly how pathways can help us grow leaders. If I have a member come into the club and they tell me that they are really here to work communication, but we know at some point communication and leadership go hand in hand with one another. And so I need to make sure that I know how to lay a course for them that will expose them to leadership projects that still feel very much communication um, style, but they are building leadership skills. I can now do that with this matrix. If a member tells me that they don't want to be a club officer, again, remember that ALB that could have been a hang up in the traditional program, that's out of the way now, because I have the opportunity to use that mentor program to let them loop through and keep working those 3 projects. Granted, they can complete the mentor program, but there's nothing to prevent them from continuing to go back and redo their assessment and re-mentor another member for a short-term project and re-mentor a member for a longer-term project. And they aren't a club officer. You're not asking them to do a whole bunch and manage the entire club. You're giving them those one-on-one opportunities where you are developing them as a leader until they have the confidence to want to take on a larger team responsibility. So now that mentor program can be huge for giving that leadership exposure without placing any demands to complete an educational achievement on it. If I know that someone already is strong in team leadership, I can skip over the simulated projects and move them right into forming and leading teams. I, as a club officer, then need to be working with the club leaders and staying connected with my district so that I know where there are opportunities. I know where small committees are being formed to support larger events in the district, or smaller committees that can be formed to support at the area level or the division level. And I can look then on the chart for a project that will align well with the skill I'm going to coach them to do. And then they can bank that completed project for when it becomes available to them as a required project or an elective in their path. Okay, so for example, if you look at row 16, the manage project successfully, I'm only expected to lead 3 to 4 people. It doesn't have to be Toastmasters specific. It doesn't require 360 feedback. It is a required project in the innovative planning path, and it's also a level 4 elective in all the other paths. So here's an opportunity where I could be coaching a member and encouraging them to do something at the area or division level. It could be organizing refreshments for a club contest, but if they don't want to do it within Toastmasters, it could also be leading 3 or 4 people together to organize and form a book club, or organize and put on a church potluck, or do any other type of community or work event. I'm involved in Feed My Starving Children, but we have a team leader that signs us up and organizes what date we're all going to show up and who's going to work what position at the tables when we pack. And so there is a leadership aspect involved in that, and that's serving the community rather than serving the Toastmasters organization. But any of those roles would qualify for the project successfully project. And as a vice president of education, I can sign off when this is completed, and the member can hold on to that sign off until they're ready to use it towards a path. Okay. All right. In this district, I've talked a lot about the two mentors that I had early on in my Toastmasters career. And Nancy Starr Cassidy, some of you know Nancy. Nancy actually had a term for this. She called it Operation Little Bit. And every time she trained leaders, whether it was club officer training or area, director training or division director training, she always talked about Operation Little Bit. Most people will at some point agree to step forward and help. Okay. But the idea is, once you have them help, how do you get them to help again? Well, if you had them step up and put them in the right role and it was a successful experience for them, then you can encourage them to step into another role. Oh, no, 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 that's bigger. No, that's more. No, no, no. And Nancy would say, no, you just say it's just a little bit more. Just a little bit more than what you did. Instead of 3 to 4 people, this time you probably will want to look for 5 to 6 people. Instead of being a 2-month effort, this one's going to be a 3-month effort. But we'll help you. We're here to help you. And so she called that Operation Little Bit by just always speaking in terms of taking on the next effort that's just a little bit bigger or a little bit more than the one you just completed and did so well. And that's how they trained me. I was eager to step forward. I was eager to do things, but what they found were situations where I'd have to work with other people. And they went so far sometimes as to pick the other people for me that I'd have to work with. Now, I kind of roll my eyes today when I think about it, but one of them was someone I would have always considered a foe and not a friend. And when Nancy told me I was going to need to work with that particular person, I went, "You've got to be crazy. I don't like her. They don't like me. It'll never work out." And she just said, "It's just a little bit more. It's just a little bit more. This will challenge you to do just that one thing. And you only have one person that you have to focus on. And I'll be here to help you." And so by the time my year was done serving with that person, they are a valued friend now. When it came time for me to move into a leadership role, they were a big promoter on my campaign team, and that shows you how this Operation Little Bit approach can work wonders for turning people around. I learned how to work with someone I thought I would never be able to work with. And by doing that, yes, there was coaching on both sides. She knew why she was there. I didn't necessarily know it had been planned, but in hindsight, I now know that it was. And so we both were able to work with each other. And now when I go into a situation, I don't hesitate from having to work with someone I may not have the best feelings about, because I know now how to handle those situations. But had I not been pushed into that Operation Little Bit effort, I never would have learned that. So again, this is how we should be developing our farming systems. Sports, baseball, football, basketball, they all bring kids up from elementary school to junior high school to high school to college to professional sports. They all use this kind of farming system where people are brought up. by just asking a little bit more each time, by pushing them a little bit harder each time, so that the levels of confidence in the weak areas come up to the levels of confidence in the strength areas. And this is how you bring people forward. I can tell you that when this farming system approach stops, it's very detrimental to the district. And my district is a good example. The farming system was shattered by a group of leaders one year, and we've struggled with trying to build it ever since. But we're trying, we're doing everything that we can. Operation Little Bit can be hugely successful, whether you take it on just for your own individual leaders that you're bringing forward, or whether you can influence other people in the communities and organizations that you're serving in to take it on. So, in conclusion, 27 real actual leadership projects now available to all of us in pathways. And that's just the 11 paths we have right now. More will be coming as more paths are developed. 9 of those 27s, a third of them include the 360 feedback. And it's really important that when you're doing leadership development, that you mentor those future leaders into not being afraid of 360, but in learning how to embrace the lessons that they will learn from that 360. Those stop, start, and continue types of feedback that they get are huge in tweaking their leadership skills and getting them on the right path to becoming strong leaders. Now, I promised that at the end of this, you would have access to these materials, and you will. In our District 3 Pathways online library, which you'll see the URL right there for the tiny URL D3 Pathways, I have a folder already out there with exploring the leadership track in Pathways, and the presentation in PDF form and the Begin with the End in Mind 2-page handout are already posted and available for you to download whenever you're ready. There are no logins required. That is a totally open and free site, and help yourself to anything that you can find that will be beneficial to you and your pathways development. I thank you for your time and attention tonight, and I hope that this presentation has opened your eyes to the opportunities available in the Pathways leadership track. Thank you.
Thank you. Wow. We are the ones who should be thanking you, and are thanking you, Trish, for those, you said, eye opening or eye popping. Definitely. I have been a district director. I have been in district leadership. I have done what, four, I've completed 4 paths, completed 2 pathways, DTMs, but I actually never thought, like Godales also mentioned, I never thought in terms of the structure that you created.
Mm-hmm.
That is really helpful. That is one of those things. I hate to print out things, but that is one of the things I will print out for the next time I will be seeing the members of my division, which is actually very timely. We are having the division contest this Saturday. So that material is coming along with me, printouts of that. Thank you so much. So,
Mm-hmm.
Trish, can you, and I know you're trying to unshare, so can
Mm-hmm.
you do that? So,
Sure.
there we are. So thank you so much. Thank you. And we are approaching, we have only 4 minutes left before the bottom of the hour. I see that we have some new people who just came in. Very quickly, if you have a comment or a question, please unmute yourself. I just saw a thumbs up from, I don't know if I'm pronouncing this right, Geslane. I saw a thumbs up for you, Trish. But is there a quick comment from anyone? Please go ahead and unmute yourself if you do. Okay, I think they're still processing everything that you share. So if I'm not seeing anyone unmute, so Trish, would you like to, in addition to everything you've shared, would you like to end with some parting words of insight or wisdom?
Mm. Uh, in my district, when we started our deployment and I became the Pathways Committee Chair for our support team here, number one, I appreciate the fact that our district officers recognize the need to continue Pathways support after the official period of guides and ambassadors ended. The next step, though, was convincing everybody that I was really wearing a big red target on my back and expected all the slings and arrows, to come my direction. And I did that because I wanted to get that venting out. I wanted them to hear, I wanted to hear what their pain points were. And the pain points really centered around familiarity. They wanted something that that it was hard. They felt like everything that they knew had been ripped out, from their heart. And my mission then became a way to try to find a way to explain pathways based on familiar terms, on things that people knew. We started with the communication program and finding the CCs. And this has been on my back burner for a long time in finding the leadership projects. But I have to confess that Julie's blog and a private conversation at the last TLI event here were what really motivated me to say, okay, everything gets put aside and I'm going to do this. So I want to thank those two situations for bringing this forward. And I hope that you will take that approach with your holdouts, your pathways holdouts, because it's more than likely a pain point that they are unwilling to share at this point that is keeping them from getting on board. And you have to find a way to gently peel back that onion layer until you can get to the root of what their problem is. And then you should have the tools now to be able to offer them a solution. So good luck.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Trish. And I will make sure that Julie Kurtesh, it's Kurtesh, I will
Kurdish.
make sure that she hears about it. I am sure that she will just be so gratified. She takes so much time creating those blog
Mhm.
posts. She researches, she creates tests, and she asks us for feedback before she creates each blog post. So I will be very happy to share that with her. And so at this point, I will end the recording. However, if anyone suddenly remembered a question or a comment that they wanted to share, we will be hanging around for a few more minutes after we end the recording. So, again, let's all thank Trish for a very, very informative and inspiring session. Thank you so much, Trish. Thank you. I will
Okay.
now end the recording. There you